we continue the change. Put your hands together, please, for Mr. Kiril Petkov.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm so glad to be together here. Because when we talk about strategy, we have to really understand some of the challenges that we have as Europeans compared to some of the alternative governments that play their strategy against us. And I'll speak about how we deal with Russia in terms of their strategic advantage in the fact that they have asymmetric coordination compared to the EU. What I mean with this is that, and this is the general thesis, and I'll tell you specific examples on it, Russia has less resources, has, of course, no global support in many ways, but what it does have is it's a single state with institutes that are coordinated under one entity. In Europe, we have, unfortunately, many states that coordinate quite a lot, but not to a degree to compensate sometimes the strategy of Russia. So Russia's advantage is to have a coordinated strategy against us, and unless we come up with an alternative coordination in our strategy towards them, in a multi-state environment, but with a single strategy that's coordinated, we're starting to be at a little bit of a disadvantage. And why it's so important to have meetings like this one is because really it's not only the governments, it's not only Brussels, but really the think tanks and people coming together, thinking together, and solving together the challenges are one way to approach it. Becoming a prime minister, I came with a promise in Bulgaria to fight corruption. It was a simple value proposition to our voters. And interestingly enough, I was not there to fight Russia at that time. It was before the war. And I just thought, let's try to clean up the space in Bulgaria, especially the energy space. And before I knew it, I was very soon fighting Russia because I realized the first thing is that Russia had realized that corruption is one of its best foreign policy tools. And we have to understand this because they're able, not only in Bulgaria, not only in the Balkans, not only in Central Europe, but across Europe and even beyond, trying to use the ability to get their influence, especially through the energy projects, in a way that they can influence internal politics, they can influence internal decision-making. And if each country looks at their own energy strategy separately, they may miss the point. We can find easily board members of Gazprom that are from Europe. We can find easily trading companies that deal well with local governments on gas and oil. But somehow, while they see the picture clearly from a single point, we may miss the multiple points that otherwise connect. In our case, we were building the South Stream or the Turkish Stream project, which is a gas pipe that goes Turkey, Bulgaria, Serbia, Austria, and all the way to continental Europe. Russian gas can flow through there. Somehow, as a prime minister, I quickly realized that while this project happened extremely fast, for about 3 years, from start to finish, the pipe that went through Bulgaria, it took 12 years for a pipe that's only a third of the length that would connect LNG terminals from Greece to Bulgaria and the rest of the Balkans. Somehow, after 2014, Europe somehow saw this as a Ukrainian issue on Crimea, and we didn't realize the idea of Russia's ability to influence our decision-making through their energy policy. And I was wondering why on earth would we do a pipe that is a third of the length for 12 years and was not completed, and a Turkish stream that happened for under 3 years from start to finish. Somehow, as I started governing, I realized that embedded Russian interests were in key boards across the energy companies that would facilitate one project versus the other. I'm sure you can relate to such projects in Germany as well with the Nord Stream, and it's the same story. So one point that came out of this is that unless we have a coordinated strategy on corruption across Europe, it will be very hard to have a coordinated answer to Russia's use of corruption throughout Europe to put their interests first. And the first point I want to make is we really have to think about increasing the mandate of the European Prosecutor's Office to cover cross-border money laundering and cross-border money flows. Because in many of the cases, including financing energy projects, but also financing political parties, they've been using this tool quite well, and we see the rise of ultra-nationalists across Europe. And one would wonder sometimes where the financing is coming from. And unless we have a sheriff that can look over these flows united from start to finish, it's very hard to capture what looks like individual series of stories across Europe. But I'm proud as a prime minister at the time, we were the first country that said no to the Russian gas blackmail to use rubles. We were 95% dependent at the time from the Russian gas. I said as a prime minister I would not pay outside of my contract, which was in US dollars, and we refused to pay in rubles, and Russia stopped our gas for 24 hours. It was an interesting direct hit on us, and I'm proud that together with the EU and the US, we were able to get an alternative gas supply and show Putin that his leverage strategies on energy throughout Europe may not work as planned. And little Bulgaria, with its 95% dependency, was able to say no and get an alternative diversification of gas for less than a month without stopping our industry. And was really a showcase that sometimes these strategic projects would not work, but it was only because in a way we're lucky, and in the way we were able to have a coordinated response with Europe and the United States in this single case. Then I'll bring another example of this discoordination that we may not see from the European perspective, but Russia clearly sees. For example, the topic of Schengen enlargement. I know that from Bulgaria and Romania we've been advocating for this for some time, but let me show you another picture of it. Right now, the key vote that's coming up in December is dependent on how would Austria and the Netherlands vote. These are the two states that are currently blocking the Schengen enlargement. I have hopefully kind of positive response from the Netherlands, even though with the current rise on their nationalists that's becoming harder and harder. But with Austria, it's also a big problem because the Freedom Party, which is their local ultra-nationalist party, is able to have the highest poll ratings in politics, which makes the central parties being afraid of topics like migration and Schengen enlargement. What we saw in the Netherlands, by the way, that's a side note, is that if the centrist parties play into the rhetorics of the nationalists, in other words, I'm a centric party and say, oh, I'm really afraid of migrants and let's just close all the borders and let's not care about joint borders, but let's care only about our border. The chances are it's not the centric parties that would win these votes, it's the nationalists that would win these votes. If you scare people on migration, they'll go all the way to the right or all the way to the left. They will not stop in the middle. So Russia realizes this. And I think one strategic play that they do is they have the ability to influence, help, assist through media, through fake news. It's surprising for us, for example, that the Nationalist Party in Austria and the Nationalist Party in Bulgaria have similar rhetoric, similar topics, similar way to communicate, similar way to use Telegram channels. It's too similar. We're not so similar in any other ways, but these parties have similar activities, the same as some of the other nationalist parties across Europe. So one has to wonder whether there is a single decision maker coordinating some of those strategies at the back. But in any case, realizing this, pushing the nationalist parties to go on the anti-migration rhetoric in Austria, that creates a significant challenge to the governing party to easily accept enlargement of Schengen. I'm still hopeful they'll do it, but I understand their difficulty for truly internal political purposes. So if you look at this case in Austria, it's a single case. But what's connected is, for example, in Bulgaria, that we're waiting for Schengen, the biggest promise for our current government is that we're in a very unlikely coalition with big opponents of ours. But what unites us is the fact that we have promised our voters that Schengen enlargement will happen. If it doesn't happen, the chances there will be a political instability in Bulgaria and we may return back into the interim government phases. Now, the interim government phases are related with forces that are much closer to Russia than the current government, which would affect what will happen mostly in the Western Balkans, because our pro-Russian forces in Bulgaria affect some of the dynamics in North Macedonia and the rest of the Western Balkans, which have an effect on of course, the EU enlargement on Ukraine and Moldova. So if we look again as a single, with a single perspective, kind of a one step ahead on each of the issues, we have to solve the energy crisis problems there, Schengen enlargement in Austria, Western Balkans accession, EU accession, and we try to manage each of those problems separately. On the other side, Russia being a single entity are totally using, in my opinion, the correlation between each of those issues and playing the path dependency of each one. And unless we pull ourselves together very fast, and I appreciate the invitation because it's not, as I said, not only governments, but thankfully NGOs and think tanks like we have here, our collective brain, and start trying to look not only at each of the crises, but the connections between them, and try to see the strategic interests of Russia on the other side. That's the only way to offset this otherwise coordination advantage that they have. And this cannot happen just through just with general discussions on each of the issues. We really have to think of Europe, as I mentioned on the European Prosecutor's Office, we really have to think of central strategy places where these pictures can connect. And only then we can actually try to offset these issues that otherwise seem individual. An alternative to this, for example, right now, if we understand all the linkages and we communicate it clearly, we can have the following: Schengen enlargement, getting the united resources of the internal police forces on the external borders. That's a type of coordination that would play in our hands. Just as an example, between Bulgaria and Romania, we have 1,500 border police. What are they guarding? What are they protecting? It's the Danube River between us. But they have to be there because they're considered external borders. If we get into Schengen, this 1,500 police force can go directly into the Bulgarian-Turkish border or the external border of the EU and protect for the illegal migration flows. But that's, again, understanding the issue, coordinating together, coming up with a coordinated strategy and playing it out. Now, if that would be the case with 1,500 policemen only between Bulgaria and Romania can be put on the external border of Bulgaria and Turkey, I can imagine what kind of a force we can pull together if, for example, we have a coordinated strategy on migration and all the internal resources we put on the external borders. That would be a completely different game changer on how we deal with border protection. And what I believe is that we did a mistake once in 2014. We didn't learn our lessons when Crimea was taken over. We had a recent research in one of the European NGOs, which stated very interestingly, they polled different countries around the world, asking them, who is Russia fighting with? And all the countries outside of Europe are saying they're fighting the West, or the Western countries, the European Union and the States, mainly. The only countries that couldn't recognize this, and they said they're fighting Ukraine, is the actual European countries. So I think we have to open our eyes. We have already learned one time how big could be the cost if we miss the opportunity to change our behavior. We have to understand that we have a smart, coordinated country that really wants to challenge the democracy of Europe and the democratic world. And we also have to understand we're stronger, we have more resources, we have all the potential. And we really have to start pulling our resources together in creating a common strategies. That's our only way out. And that's especially important as we see the US getting into the presidential elections, and the more and more the role of Europe has to strengthen. We cannot rely on somebody else solving our problem. So with this in mind, I want to leave you with the idea of, and the kind of the direction to think, how can we create a centers of strategy coordination along the European institutions that we already have, so that we can offset the current Russia-United strategies, and how can we, instead of playing into the rhetorics of the nationalists, how can we actually continue to put forward solutions that are based on coordinated actions versus trying to save each country by themselves or each crisis by themselves. Thank you very much.